and welcome to Missed Checkpoints, the video game book club podcast. Today we're starting our discussion on Firewatch. I'm your host Greg, and joining me today is
Trevor. What's going on?
What's going on? And Dante's here, but he will pop in momentarily. So this is kind of a like a bonus episode that we have, just kind of in between the games that we got going on this month. So this should be a shorter episode. I don't know. We have a tendency to say that, and then they always end up going a little bit longer. So we'll see how this goes.
Just depends on how good the game is.
Yeah. So like I said, we had Firewatch this time. So I guess I'll start it off and go with a little bit of background information on Firewatch. Firewatch is an adventure game. It follows the story of a fire lookout named Henry in the Shoshone, I think that's how you say it, Shoshone National Forest a year after the Yellowstone fires of 1988. As time goes on, some weird things start to happen with him and his supervisor, Delilah. Henry talks to Delilah over a walkie-talkie, and during dialogue, you're sometimes given different choices on how you want to respond to her. Firewatch was developed by Campo Santo, which is their first game ever. The game was created by Jake Rodkin and Sean Vanneman, who were creative leads at Telltale's, creative leads for Telltale's The Walking Dead, and Nels Anderson, who also was the lead designer for Marq of the Ninja, and also has artwork from Ollie Mall. I think he's done some movie art before. Also, Chris Remo, formerly of the Idle Thumbs podcast, was also involved in this game. I believe he did the music composition. The reception of Firewatch was generally pretty favorable. I think it sits at around an 81 on Metacritic right now. The game sold more than 500,000 copies within the first month of release, and over 1 million copies at the end of the first year. And to date, the game has hit about 2.5 million in sales across all platforms. As far as platforms, the game is available on Xbox One, PC, and PlayStation 4, and I think there's a Switch version that's supposed to come out as well. So, that's about it I've got for background. So I guess what we can do now is kind of move into the prologue of the game, how it sets everything up. So when you first start the game, it's kind of almost like text adventure like. You kind of are presented with some text giving you a little bit of background on a conversation that two people are having. And you find out this is Henry talking with his I guess girl, well, just somebody he met, but ends up being his girlfriend / wife. So the game's basically setting up this relationship between you and Julia. And also kind of gives you a little bit of background as far as how things get to where they are. You get a few choices here. I think one of them is you get to choose the name of your dog. I think you get to choose the question that you ask Julia the first time you meet her. And I think largely these don't affect the game at all, other than maybe change some dialogue. But, you're still going to pretty much get to the same endpoint. Do you remember how you answered anything here, Trevor?
Man, I don't. And I honestly forgot all about this prologue because I started this game back in March.
Yeah.
And I intended on finishing it, but I never got around to it until we decided to play it just for a bonus episode.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really just picked up where I had left off.
Oh, okay. So when you did play it, do you remember how far you had gotten?
Maybe to day 2.
Okay.
I think that's where I picked up.
Okay.
But yeah, I honestly don't remember any of the prologue. Well, I didn't remember any of it until you had just mentioned it.
Gotcha. Yeah, I forget what it is. Like one of the questions I think when you meet her is like, one of them's like a kind of a corny pickup line. The other is like you ask her what her major is or something like that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's just kind of like filler stuff to kind of, I guess, fill out what type of relationship they have or anything. But the other big part about this is you find out that his wife is she's developing dementia. and I think ultimately, I believe that they decide to. I think what is it? I'm trying to remember exactly what happens here. I think she ends up going with her family, or she's being treated somewhere for it, and he decides that he's going to go out to Wyoming and become a fire lookout, basically. So I guess it's just his way of trying to get his mind off of everything and just take some time to himself.
And it's pretty cool the way they deliver it too, because you're kind of it's leading up to where you're going to be based. Like you're walking through the park or the forest
Yeah,
while all this is happening, or while this conversation is going on.
and it's like, I mean, it the tone that it sets, at least for me, and this might just be like a personal thing with me, but it was just kind of super heavy. And I guess it's just something that you know, because I'm thinking of it from like me having kids and just kind of like developing dementia and then having to have to worry about people take care of you, or potentially people who your loved ones seeing you like basically deteriorating. It's just kind of like a heavy, like super heavy thing. So I kind of appreciated it, but it definitely made me feel pretty bad to start the game off like that, because I think there's even a part where it's speaking to I think him and his wife being in the bed, and I want to say it was something like, and I want to look this up to actually make sure what it was, but it's something of the nature of like, think they're about to have sex or something like that, and then she basically forgets who he is at the time. It's just kind of crazy to think of something like that, but yeah, like I said, the game definitely starts out super heavy, and it starts, kind of sets the tone, which I thought, I mean, there's definitely some heavy stuff I think that happens in the game, but for the most part, I think that it starts out that way and kind of sets you up, but then it definitely shifts within like the first few days to kind of a lighter tone, I think.
So at this point in the game, I honestly thought it was going to be another walking sim, and by walking sim, I'm talking just 100% environmental context. I don't know if you ever played Dear Esther.
No, I haven't played it.
But that game, like you're basically walking along a beach, and there's no interaction like with any other characters in the game. You're basically walking along, and like you kind of hit cues, and it gives you little tidbits of like a part of the story, and you really just put it together yourself, and that's what I really thought this game was going to be, playing this prologue.
So I was thinking completely different. So I remember seeing, I forgot when this got announced, but I thought it got announced at like a E3 or something like that. Or I think I vaguely remember something like that happening. And coming into it, I thought this was going to be like kind of like a horror game. Like I had no context of whatever this was going to be. So once I started playing it, I was like, huh, this game is a lot different than like what I was expecting. But I definitely, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I like the game. I definitely like it a lot. But again, it was nothing like I was expecting. So, but I was definitely along for the ride.
Have you played any other walking sims?
Never. Like I'm trying to think. Have I played anything like that before? I guess.
And that was like the main reason why I started playing this like back in March, because I think around that time I was playing a bunch of really short 2-hour games, and then I went through a bunch of walking sims. Like I played Tacoma, and then What Remains of Edith Finch.
Okay, so maybe this counts, right? I played Flower. Does that count as a? I guess does that
That's
kind of
one
count?
I've wanted to play. That's a PlayStation exclusive, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I haven't played that one yet.
Okay, so I played that. So I guess that's the last one that comes to mind. I'm trying to think off the top of my head of like maybe something else. I guess something like Abzu might count. I never finished
Yeah,
that.
it's kind of exploratory.
Um, yeah, I think that's all I can think of off the top of my head. But yeah, so I guess we'll do is start moving in a little bit. So the way that I kind of break it down a little bit, and I guess I don't necessarily have to go beat by beat as far as days, but it's not a very long game. I think it took me like around 3.5 hours, maybe 4 hours to finish. Um, so I guess you end the prologue with you go up to the tower, and this is your first time speaking to Delilah, and she's kind of a smartass, I guess. At least comes off as it like early on. She kind of both kind of quip at each other a little bit, and after you've kind of introduced each other or introduced yourselves to each other, that's the end of the prologue. Moves into day one. It's your first day on the job, and you're tasked with tracking down some what looks to be fireworks being shot off in the forest. Um, so I think you have all the tools up to this point is the compass, the map, and I'm trying to remember if there's anything else that you really use. I think that's it, right? Or I'm
Yeah,
missing something.
this first part, I think you just have a map and a compass.
Okay. So Henry travels out there, and meanwhile, while you're doing this, what'll end up happening is you'll hear Delilah come across the radio, and sometimes she'll, just say things to you. Sometimes you're only given one response. Sometimes you give multiple responses. Sometimes there's environmental things that you can. I guess it's kind of. I forgot to mention this. So the game's first person. So it's like a first person adventure game. So you're just kind of walking around the environment at times, and you'll come across things that it'll identify that you can talk to Delilah about it. So you'll spark up a conversation that way. Sometimes she'll just come over the radio. Other times, and what you can do is, like I said, you can talk to her, and you're given different answers sometimes or different responses. Now, I don't know if I guess I didn't look this up. I don't know if these change any potential like conversation routes as the game goes on. I know actually. Okay, so I remember somebody in the stream chat. I was streaming this a few days ago, but somebody said that the way you answer one question in particular can make Delilah respond a little bit different, and it changes. It can kind of change the context of, I guess, those two's relationship. I think, but I think that's all that I'm aware of. I'm not sure if Dante is not here, so he was the other person that played through this. I don't know if he's got if he can confirm anything of that.
As far as things changing,
Yeah. If the responses change, any like potential conversation routes that you get.
I haven't. Oh, sorry, I muted myself during mid sentence. I have an inclination to think that there's the occasional thing that might change, but I'm not 100% positive on it. And I feel like if we just like, once we get a little bit more into the details, we might have one of those, oh snap, you went through this part. We might have one of those Riddick moments.
Yeah.
So that might be the easiest way to unearth that.
Okay. So Henry ends up going out to this lake and confronts two girls that are out there shooting fireworks. And you give him a couple ways to handle the situation. I forget what dialogue options you have, but I think one of them is something about, oh, I didn't touch anything, and there's another one, and then there's another one that's kind of like you're just being kind of mean to him. Ultimately, whatever you say, you're supposed to, the job is to basically get them to come out and not shoot any fireworks or anything. I think what I ended up doing was picking up the radio, and I just kind of, out of instinct, I just picked it up and threw it in the radio in the lake, and then they got mad about it. And then they decide that they're gonna get out of there. You guys remember what you did in that situation, or
Is this the part where you can steal their alcohol?
I think, yeah, I think there is some vodka or something out there, some whiskey maybe that you can pick up and take.
Because I think that's what I did.
I definitely threw the radio into the lake.
Okay. I don't know why I just figured that was the easiest thing, and I'm not even thinking about it in as far as like me being kind of like a park ranger thing, like, oh, that's probably not a good idea to just throw somebody's personal property in the water. But I just kind of was thinking, coming from like a video game perspective of, oh, this will get them out the water. So
I mean, that is like the fastest way to end any conversation with anybody. Just literally throw their boombox into the water.
just break something they own. They'll eventually either fight you about it or they'll just get out of there. So, anyway, on the after you do this, you start walking back, and I think you go through. I think it's Cave 452 or something like that. It may be Thunder Canyon. I think maybe that's how they refer to it. It's your first time seeing this, and then there's kind of a lock in front of this gate. So you're like, okay, what's going on in here? So you don't really get an opportunity to do anything in there, but this is, I guess, this is an important part of the story at a certain point. And you make it back to your tower and find out that it was vandalized, which you're assuming it was the two girls that were doing that, but you don't really know. And that ends day one. So, like I said, the early in the game, it's kind of like there's not a whole lot going on. It's just kind of menial, like park ranger type stuff.
Well, I will say, like, I missed the first 10 minutes of this, so I don't know if you guys went into detail, but I love how subtle this game is about all of its storytelling and just going around your little tower or whatever and looking at all of the little world building things and be like, oh, well, this is... I can't remember if he had a photo of his wife or something in there.
Yeah, he does, on the desk in there.
Yeah, because that's one of the things they break, if I recall, when they vandalize the place, right?
I think so.
So, yeah, it's just like there's all these little subtle elements of the story being told around you without it being explicitly, spelled out at every single moment.
Yeah. Definitely a lot of attention to detail.
Is it in day one where you first find your the lockbox or the supply crate?
I think you do, yeah. So that's I guess that's another thing I missed, yeah.
Another part of world building. Like once you unlock these, and funny enough, all the combinations are the same 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah.
But like once you open it, there's usually a map in there, and it updates your map to show like different areas.
And I mean, they even explain it being 1, 2, 3, 4. It's like, oh, well, nobody likes passwords, so I just set all of them to 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's totally something like Delilah or whatever her name would do.
Yeah. And it's even cool that, talking about the lockboxes, it's kind of like there's things in there, and I think at this point in the game, I'm not really sure because you're given the option on some things if you want to carry them, and I'm just kind of like, well, what's the significance of me, like, taking things with me, right? I'm like, is there, because I don't think there's an inventory that you can even access.
Yeah, the only thing you can look at are notes that you keep.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was doing that a lot because I didn't know if it was, like, there was going to be a pop quiz or something towards the end.
Yeah.
Like, tell me about this person, but yeah, I kept most of the notes after reading them just because it was an option.
Yeah, I think I just started doing them just because after a while I was like, well, I'll just start doing that because of that. And there's some other funny stuff that you can take. I think there was like a granola bar that's just kind of in one of those, and it's just like, well, I don't really know if taking this does anything, but it's kind of cool that you have the option. I guess it makes you kind of, I mean, it's essentially all world building, but it makes you think like, is there any consequence for this at all? Or, what's going on with this?
It kind of made me think, were they going to implement something in this game and just didn't have enough time to or something?
I think it's the exact opposite, where they look at how many games like this go the gamey approach, and it's like, well, how do I destroy, like, the artistic side of my narrative by making it into a game? And they're just like, how can we just make an actual story and have stuff that, some things in life just don't have an inherent value.
Yeah.
And you can still do it, but you don't have to.
I think that would probably mess up some people where they're just like, well, why is it there? Like, why I have to do this?
100%. All gamers just like, oh, everything I'm supposed to do is supposed to affect the ending, or I'm supposed to be this, like, giant hero, or I'm part of this greater thing. And this game plays against that notion at every single turn.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's pretty much, I think that's most of what we've kind of got to at the end of day one. So day two begins, and there's a communication line that's being reported as being cut. So your job basically is kind of to head out there and check on it. Um, no, sorry, I lost track of that. So once he heads out there, I believe that when he finds it, they think that it's the girls that had vandalized this once again. Or maybe I may have my events wrong as far as that. Actually, no, I think that's it. So once you head out there, you find a trail of smoke. So now that's the next thing that he's going to head out and try and find on. So he goes to the trail of smoke. It's a campsite, has the same beer that was at the lake. So once again, we assume it's the two girls from earlier. You see some clothing out there as well. But you also notice that the tent is shredded. So we're not really sure what's going on. Was it an attack? Were they attacked by an animal? Was it something? But anyway, you run across a camera before this, I believe. I can't remember where you pick it up at. But I do remember, like, specifically Delilah tells you to take pictures while you're out there. I just can't remember where you got it from, if it was in the tower before you went out or if you were walking around and found it. I don't know if either of you guys remember.
It had to have been day one because I don't remember picking it up.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I can't remember.
So you take some pictures out there, and I believe that's pretty much it for day two. It's not like a whole lot that's going on in that day. I can't remember if there's anything that pops up between Henry and Delilah as far as their relationship, but I think that's where, from this point on, I feel like you can start feeling that they're starting to get a little bit closer, starting with day three. Because I think that's when she starts asking Henry about how he looks, and then you're given a few choices on how you want to respond. Which is weird because I didn't even look at the photo of Henry that was in there in that tower, but I pretty much given like a pretty good description of him based off of what I thought he looked like, and then I kind of found the picture and I was like, oh, okay, well that's pretty cool that because I guess beforehand you could have just picked up the picture had you seen it and just said exactly what it was, or you could have just lied. It's kind of one of those situations where it's like you could do whatever you want, and it's kind of cool that they give you that option. And I don't really know if that ultimately changes how Delilah responds to you throughout the story, but
no, man, because she doesn't fall in love with you for your appearance. It's about what's on the inside.
But
so, just out of curiosity, how did you guys play that, knowing that you had this wife in the hospital? Is she in the hospital, or is she at home and you're just like taking care of her, quote unquote, at this point?
I can't remember. So I can't remember if she's at home or if she's being looked after by family members, or if it's like she's in a hospital. But yeah, I mean, she is suffering from dementia. So I just can't remember where she was at as far as that. But yeah, I was treading pretty lightly on it because I was like, I don't know how I feel about trying
it's
to
a very interesting dynamic.
Yeah.
Just like, hey, you have this person that technically you're married to. The fact that I even use technically you're married to upsets me. But like, she vaguely remembers who you are at that point, or doesn't, if I recall. Like your wife.
Oh, that his wife remembers him.
Yeah, because I think she forgets his name occasionally and stuff.
Yeah,
like that.
there's some in the prologue. There's like a section where specifically she forgets who he is, but I think she still knows who he is. But I think it's just she forgot it, like a specific situation.
It's just a bad situation that's very ambiguous in a lot of regards.
Yeah. But yeah, how did you? I guess do you remember how you answered it, Trevor?
Like the question about his appearance.
Yeah, or like if you were trying to like play it up at all, maybe hoping that something was going to come of this, or
yeah, I think I ended up lying and telling her something. Like I think one of the responses was like a celebrity.
Yeah, it was like Burt Reynolds. I think that's what it was.
I think I picked that one.
Yeah, so that's all that happens on day 3. It's just kind of like and most of this stuff is kind of, I think it's relationship building between those two.
It's also
Because, oh, go ahead.
it's also weird that they are getting closer and they've only known each other for 3 days.
Well, I guess given the situation, as far as like, if I was, because looking at, I mean, based off like how the game is, right? Like, there's literally nothing to do, right? You only have, I mean, I think I would go crazy, not
That
having
other
anybody to
person
talk
on
to.
the end of the radio.
Yeah,
That's all you got.
yeah. So it's kind of like you don't really have much of a choice but to kind of like develop some type of relationship with this person, because like, what else are you gonna do, right? I mean,
I
you're just kind
mean,
of out there in the woods by yourself.
it's not the end of the world.
No, that's true. But and yeah, I'm just thinking about, because it's the at the time this game takes place, it's not like they have cell phones or anything. It's not like you can just call a friend or whatever and be like, oh, okay, I'll see what they're up to. You know, so you're just kind of out there in the wilderness with just another person on the other end of the line, basically. Um, so that's it for day 3, and day 9. There's two women that are being reported as missing for about a week. And this is at the point where you're like, oh, were these the 2 girls that we saw out in the lake and out in the woods? And Delilah has a little bit of apprehension as far as informing the authorities about the girls, which kind of makes me think that something's going on at this point, right? Like, why is she worried about? I mean, if there's no harm, no foul, like, why is she so worried about, telling the authorities, hey, there were 2 girls that were out here, just in case that happened to be them, It's kind of weird.
It's a very subtle thing showing that Delilah is not necessarily a great person, and you kind of get a little bit more of that as the game goes on, but just the subtle like hints is like, I don't really want to lose my job over this. We should just kind of let it play out, and as long as we don't snitch about the girls, we should be fine. Let's just lay low for right now.
Yeah, she definitely isn't the best decision maker.
No, yeah, completely. And I don't remember. I apologize. I don't have my order of events correct, but I don't. There's one point in this game where he's talking to her, and she tells him to hold on for a second, and she starts talking to somebody else. And I don't know if this is some like around that point, or if it had already happened, or if it's after this.
Yeah, I remember that. And it started making me think, is she even at another tower like him? Like, is she by herself or with somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think we're quite there yet. I think that's when we kind of get that hint that there might be another party out for us at some point.
Okay, yeah.
But it's around this point. It's getting close to that.
And that's pretty much it for day 9. And then you move into, and it's kind of weird. Also, it's kind of weird how this game kind of skips around a lot, right? It literally goes from, you finish your first couple of days, and then it jumps from day 3 to day 9, and now we're at day 15, where Henry wakes up in the middle of the night and answers the radio. He hears Julia, his wife, on the radio. It's just, I mean, I'm assuming this is just kind of a dream, not really a dream, because I think Delilah mentions him calling her Julia at some point. So I guess he kind of wakes up in the middle of the night and thinks this is Julia. So he's kind of having a conversation with his wife. Just kind of weird. It threw me I was like, what is going on with this? But it was kind of cool. And I think Julia even asked him, how's he liking everything out there? She even mentioned something about Delilah, and was like, oh, she seems like a pretty nice girl. And he's just kind of like, yeah, whatever. And that's really all that happens. I think that's the first time you really hear Julia. And I think that's the last time that ever happens. It was just kind of a cool sequence, I think, just to kind of bring up and be like, hey, it shows that he's still thinking about his wife, even though he's been out here for a little bit, and obviously still cares about her. But it was, like I said, it was kind of a nice sequence for them to kind of reference back to that.
Yeah, the whole day skipping thing was kind of jarring at first, but I guess we'll get into it later, but I think it plays directly into how they wanted to tell the story and about this. A lot of things seeming like they're bigger than they actually are, and making this timetable of stuff. So it's not like, oh, all of these events happen within like a 5-day period like most video games. It's like, no, each one of these is a very spaced out thing, and due to the spaces in it, you can kind of see like how this person subtly thinks things that are bigger than him are actually happening when they aren't.
Yeah. And even things as far as like adding to the realism of like the relationship between Henry and Delilah. I mean, obviously the conversations are gonna, gradually get a little bit more complex and a little bit deeper for the fact
stuff
that
is happening naturally behind the scenes.
Yeah. So it totally makes sense. And we move up to day 33. Skips, basically a whole 2 weeks. And you go out to these supply drops to go get some supplies. And Delilah says, hey, make sure you just grab all that you want or all that you need, or only what you need, because everybody has to get stuff from this. And when you go out there, I was thinking to myself, I really wonder what happens if, I take everybody's stuff and not just like only get the stuff that I'm supposed to get. Just the video game nature of like, is there going to be any consequence for this? Does it mess anything up? Does everybody just call you an asshole now because you did it? But yeah, it's just kind of a little cool sequence that you get. And I believe that's all that you do for day 33. And I just realized on my notes I just skipped day 34, so I don't know if anybody remembers what happened.
I actually looked it up, and day 34 is like the consequence of what happens if you take more than your stuff.
Oh, okay. So did anybody do that?
No, I only took mine.
Okay. Yeah, I'm saying I only took the stuff that was
I'm not a terrible person. Sorry.
Day 34, if you take all the supplies, she kind of calls you and cusses you out. Well, I don't know if she cusses you out, but she's pretty pissed at you, and she gives you an earful.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I wasn't sure what was going to happen if you did that, but that's cool that that's like a sequence that you wouldn't even see unless you did that.
So, I guess this is a little bit of an aside to what we've been doing so far, but how did you guys feel navigating, I guess, the environment of this world?
It took me a little bit of time to get used to, and I appreciated it being that way though, because I mean, most of the game I had to look at my map for a little bit to get my bearings, and then I was just walking around with the compass out. But I feel like you naturally would be navigating the forest like that, so it kind of it felt pretty natural, I guess, in that sense.
Yeah, to me it felt like you actually had gameplay to do, and while the gameplay wasn't quote-unquote interesting in the traditional sense, having to actually navigate this space and recognize landmarks, I thought that was just a really neat thing, and just how naturally all of this like trail stuff, interface together with one another, which I guess that's how it actually works in real life for the most part if it's, laid out correctly.
Yep.
Yeah, to me it felt very realistically cumbersome. Because like there were points where I would try to pull out my map and walk at the same time, and you couldn't, because like I don't know where you the controls, the stick that you use in order to view the map, like to move around the map, you're also having to use that to walk. So I don't know, it's like you can't do both at the same time. You have to put your map away. You can do both at the same time. It's just kind of difficult.
I feel like they intentionally did that so people wouldn't just walk around with the map open. Like, well, I'm just going to look at this point of me walking around and get my bearings that way. It was like, nah, we kind of want you to actually do this like you'd be doing if you were navigating this in real life.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's not a sim, but at the same time, you don't go around walking through Walmart with a book or something, You just can't focus, and you're going to run into stuff if you do that.
Yeah.
And the game does a really good job of articulating that detail, which can be frustrating if you're,
yeah.
It also
taking it from a game standpoint.
It also took me some time to get used to how slow you walk in the game.
Yeah.
Which is funny.
Bro, I felt like I was booking.
Well, I was running. I mean, there's a run button or whatever. I guess you're just clicking. Yeah, I think you click on the
Yeah,
thumbstick
you
and
weren't
then
running
Oh my
everywhere
God.
because you freaking look.
Oh my God.
you didn't know about that. That was the first thing I
I want
tried.
to say
I'm glad
I
I brought
tried
this
to
up.
run, but it didn't work.
I think. Well, I know you can't run. There's certain times where it won't allow you to run, and you can't run while you have the map. But other than that, yeah, you can definitely run in
No
that game.
wonder it felt like this game took me like 5 or 6 hours.
Bro, this dude, he can run, man. He might have been on like the track team.
Like, yeah.
Yeah, the whole time I was thinking, like, man, I've played some walking sims that are slow, but this one here is very slow paced. I thought that was just a part of the
Wait.
game.
Let me be the Marcus. Do you think that should have been part of the tutorial, Trevor?
Man, see, this game has a lot of, I guess, weird controls. Not necessarily weird, but like everything is mapped to the directional buttons. And so, like I said before, it's hard to do them while you're trying to move too. And like I don't think I figured out that you could raise your compass by itself. Like I was always raising the compass with the map, and then I would do something else in order to get rid of the map and still have my compass out.
Yeah, I think I kind of mirror some of those same things. Like, for sure, one of the things, I mean, out of the 4 or 3.5 hours or whatever I played, I kept forgetting what brought up the map and what brought up the compass. So, or I would do one, and then I would want to put the map down but keep the compass out, and I couldn't remember what sequence of button, if it was like I press up to bring up the map and then down to, I forget what it was. It's either up to, this is playing on PS4, but I think it's up to bring up the map and then down for compass. And then once you have the compass out, you can press up to bring up the map, but if you press down, I felt like it put both things down. So then I kept like forgetting like exactly what did what for some reason. I guess it was just, and this just could be me, but it was something weird about it that kept like messing me up every time.
I definitely know what you're talking about, and I remember running into that issue. And I don't know if it was like the order of operations, you had to hit the buttons or what, but there was something slightly off with the controls.
And it wasn't enough to like make me hate the game, or it didn't bug me or anything, but it was just weird. It was something that kept happening. I kept asking myself, why do I keep doing this? Like, it was just kind of odd that it was even designed like that. Cause I guess, looking at the controller, I mean, they easily could have just put this on like a button to, make it a little bit easier, but I don't know, maybe it's just kind of, they thought that was the easiest way of doing it, or maybe this was like a purpose, maybe there's a purpose behind it, possibly.
I am glad they didn't put an actual tutorial in this game. I think that would have broken the immersion.
Oh, yeah.
Just to answer your
I
question,
100%
Dante.
agree. That's good to hear. That's good to hear. Because, yeah, this game does so much to try not to be like a game. And I really appreciate that aspect of it. So, yeah, the tutorial, especially if it was up front, would have really gone a ways to kind of break you from that, I think.
So then we move into day 64, and Henry's calling in a fire that he sees out, and he sees from his tower, and so this is another situation where you kind of get to see a little bit into Henry and Delilah's relationship. You get a chance to name the fire, and they give you a few different choices. I think you even get to say, do you want to name it Delilah? I forgot. I wanted to say, I think that that's what I was going to say, or what I chose was to name it Delilah, but I think she said something about, no, we can't do that. And I think ultimately I named it after my dog, I think that's one of the choices. And then I forget what I even chose as my dog's name, but I remember it being the dog's name. And then also you get I think Delilah makes a comment about, hey, do you want to go down and watch the fire together? And so this is a situation where somebody in my stream chat told me that if you answer it a certain way, it almost comes off, or it almost makes it seem like it's kind of like there's like some sexual intent behind what Delilah wanted to do. But I think the way I answered it was just kind of like, nah, I don't want to go down there.
Yeah, there was definitely some gesturing, some subtle hints.
Is that how you answered it?
That was how she answered it.
Oh yeah. But yeah, just kind of, and so it's kind of weird that they start doing this because then you're like, oh, okay, well, and this also makes me think, well, does this mean that Henry is eventually gonna meet Delilah in person? And I feel like that's what they're trying to build up to. And you're thinking like, oh, okay, well, this has got to happen at some point that he's gonna meet her. They're gonna have this like conversation. And it's like you're gonna have this moment of, oh, is this gonna, is he gonna try and do something with her even though he's got his wife at home?
So I think I ended up naming the hurricane June, which was funny because it's currently the month of July in the game.
Oh yeah.
But that was what happened? Oh, when she asked me what they should name it, I think I did throw out the name Delilah, and that was more. It wasn't really like flirting. It was more to as a joke, like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, we should call it Delilah. But then she was just like, oh no, how about my middle name? And her middle name is June, so they decided to call it June.
Yeah, I think I also went with June if I recall.
So, well, yeah, it's just another kind of, like I said, world building thing that they add. And I think after this is when the game starts to get a little bit. I guess they start getting to the climax point where it gets a little bit more heavy. How do you guys feel about Henry and Delilah's relationship up until this point?
I think it was still moving a little fast.
Well, I guess it seems like it in the sense of how long you've been playing, but I guess that kind of goes back to how they sequence the days, right? Or how they kind of skip ahead so much.
And I mean, like you said, he doesn't have any outside communication, so I don't know if he's like keeping tabs on the condition of his wife or, even like trying to contact her at all.
That's crazy to even think that, well, I guess we don't really have any information as far as like how much communication he has to the outside world, but like that's crazy to think that he may be out there and he can't even check on his wife to see how she's doing.
I thought it was confirmed that he doesn't have any whatsoever, if
Yeah.
I recall.
That's
Because pretty much he can interface with Delilah, and she can interface with pretty much like the rest of the camp or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But aside from that little connection right there, he doesn't have much that he can do.
Yeah.
And I think for 30 or so days it seems fair because they haven't even met, and they haven't really started talking or anything like that. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So we skip a little bit further ahead now, and we're at day 76. You end up getting a call to go out to the lake to go investigate something. I forget what it is. And while you're out there, you find a clipboard that has notes written on it.
Oh, that's when you're going fishing.
Yeah. And while you're out there, you find that clipboard. And you're like, huh. This has some of the stuff that we said while we're on the radio written on this. And you're like, okay. So somebody's been listening. So I think you see something else around there that you have to investigate while you're out there too. And while you're doing that, you see a dropped radio on the ground. You're like, okay. So you run to go pick it up, and then you're attacked. Somebody hits you from behind, basically. And you black out for a little bit, and you wake up. I didn't know what was going on at this point. Because I'm just kind of like, I mean, there's little cues that somebody is around, I think, because one time earlier in the game, you're going up to your tower and then you see somebody flashing a light on you. I couldn't remember what day it was.
Yeah, that was at the very beginning. I think it was right after you run into those two girls.
Yeah, that might be it then. But yeah, so you're like, okay, I don't really know what's going on here. Why would somebody be attacking me? Is there like, Why does anybody want me dead, right? What am I doing? I'm just out here watching fires. But yeah, I think it's a pretty cool sequence where you're just kind of like, all right, well, something's going on now. We're getting to the meat of the game at this point.
Like, it's a genuinely scary thing that happens.
Yeah.
Because you don't have any defense or anything like that. And it's just, well, every day after this, I need to be on my P's and Q's because I could get attacked by this dude again.
Yep. And on the clipboard, I think it says Wapiti Station. I think this was on the clipboard. So now you're trying to figure out, well, what is Wapiti Station like? Where is this at? And I think Delilah remembers the name. Says it's somewhere out there. It's kind of like a science, or it's not a science place, but I guess it's like a old government research area, I believe. So you try to head out there, but it's locked out. There's a gate in front of it that you can't get around. So that leads you to walk to, I think, a burned down camp area where there's an axe. You pick that up, and once you do that, there's a little bit of conversation with Delilah. I don't remember if she says anything significant at this point. But I think that ends day 76. And once you start day 77, I thought this was another like kind of neat sequence where you start the day, and then Delilah tells you to go look at something in your tower. I think it's a diagram or an illustration of different trees, and she's like, "Oh, hey, can you?" I'm trying to remember how it goes, but it's something like, "Hey, can you see that tree that's in the middle of that diagram right there? Yeah, I need you to walk out to where that's at, and and then just give me a call when you're out there." Because I think, you're aware at this point somebody's listening in, and Delilah's trying to not let the person know where you're heading, just in case this is like some type of, they're tracking you, or this, he may end up trying to assault you again. So you end up finding out that it's at Cottonwood Creek, and the reason she sends you out there is to get a new radio. So hopefully this one isn't, the person at this point isn't listening in.
And I was so confused. Like, that's not how walkie-talkie radios work.
Well, I guess,
like, even if you get a new one, they can just tune in to whatever frequency you're using.
Yeah. I guess
it's just a process of finding that frequency and finding, like, the time of day that you're on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think there is a suspension of disbelief that goes on with that.
Yeah.
I will say, I think it was interesting because at this point I was still trying to figure out if Delilah was truly on my side or was she working with this other dude. Because I think she kind of gets a little sketchy in this area as well, in some certain ways. I can't remember in specific what she said, but I was always very wary about her after that attack.
I think you just kind of... You're meant to feel like that just based on the way that you guys' relationship is at this point, right? It's somebody you just haven't seen. You have limited interaction with them, and it's basically a talking head at this point, right? And it's just somebody telling you to do things, and you don't really know what their true intentions are because you're only going off what you're given at that point. So
you were literally a loner for pretty much the entirety of this game.
Yeah,
and you just kind of have to infer. Without any, like, actual facial inference or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
Everything is, I don't want to say connotation or whatever, or denotation, because people's voices do have inflection.
Yeah.
But you don't have a face to look at and be like, okay, this is a person I can trust.
Oh yeah, I lost my point. Here we go. So once you end up getting the new radio, you go to Wapiti Station, and you come to find out that it's a research site basically with some comm equipment. You see some data in in this little tin area, and you assume this is where the person who's been listening to you the entire time has been. And Delilah suggests that you burn the site down. You get a few responses here. I don't think they change. I think that she doesn't. Obviously you don't burn it down, but you get a few ways to answer it. But ultimately, you don't burn the site down. But this is also, I think, you end up getting another tracking device while you're out here. I think, right?
Yeah, the upgraded compass. I think it's like
Yep.
a wave. What was it called? I can't remember what the device is called.
It's not black box, right? Or I'm thinking something else. Maybe.
No, you find like a black box or a thing in there, but this is something that can detect like radio waves or something like that.
So, yeah, basically, for the most part, it's a upgraded compass, so kind of helps as far as navigating and tracking down a few other things that you'll need from here on out. Trying to remember if there's something else that happens here. I think Delilah tells you to go back to the tower because she's like, "Hey, are you in your tower?" And you're like, "No." Well, there's somebody in there. And you're like, "Oh." So this kind of makes you think, are we about to have like a standoff with somebody? Am I going to run up and this dude's going to attack me again? And you make it back to the tower and nobody's there, but there's a tape that's on there with a tape player. And you play it and it's basically it's a conversation that Delilah and Henry had about, we should burn down that center. And you're like, okay, so now they have both of us incriminated as far as doing this, if it does happen. So I'm like, okay, well, does this mean that this is going to happen? Or does this mean, like, what does this mean at this point, right? Like, is this guy going to come back and use this on him? Or, it's kind of crazy.
Yeah, this part really had me
Has there
weirded
been
out.
any update on the two girls at this point?
No, so that happens a little, I think, towards the end. But yeah, no, at that point we still, don't know where the girls are at or anything.
Okay.
So then I think also that adds to her, like, she's definitely shook at this point because she's like, oh, not only do
My
we
job.
have that, yeah, not only do we have two missing girls that could potentially be dead on this, in this forest, but now they have this recording of me threatening or saying that we should burn down part of the forest. So
Someone whose
it's not a
job
good
it
look.
is to watch out for fires.
Yeah. So I was like, that's not a good look, fam. So, but yeah, it's a little crazy. And at this point, I definitely still don't know where the game is going. Like, I don't know, I still think, and I'm still thinking that, all right, at the end of this, they're all gonna, he's gonna meet Delilah and whatever's gonna happen is gonna happen, but it's still, still not really sure exactly where it's going. What else? I think there is something else that you get. I don't know if you've gotten the key at this point. I think maybe you do get the key. Right? You get the key to go down to the cave? Or I'm looking at my notes and I'm like, I think I might be missing that.
That might be the very last. No, the day before the last day.
Key. Key feels like it's later, but I could be wrong. Because don't you have to go to that camp first, where the station is, like the radio station, before you...
I thought that you found the key. Oh, it's once you get that tracking device or whatever, the upgraded compass, it points you to somewhere there's a backpack or something, and I feel like there's a key there. And maybe that's what it is.
Because I think I know what you're talking about, and I think you unlock a shortcut in that one cave. I think you unlocked the shortcut earlier than, like, the event that happens there.
Maybe. But either way, at this point, on day 78, it's finally time to head down to the cave that you had seen earlier. That's locked away. So once you head down to the cave and unlock the gate that was previously locked, as soon as you enter, somebody locks it behind you. And you're like, okay.
Boss battle.
Yeah. Like, all right, something's about to go down. So this is just like another exploration sequence, just kind of walking around. Um, but what was kind of weird was when you are going through the cave, there's a section where you kind of look down this cliff and you see there's a shoe. I'm like, huh, all right. Well, it's weird that that's there. Not really much I can do from here, so I'm just going to keep walking through the cave. And once you walk through and come out on the other end of it, kind of find this. I don't really want to call it a camp, but I guess it's kind of like a. Well, I guess we'll call it a camp for whatever it is. But, and I guess the thing that I did miss during this part of it, I think, does Delilah mention Ned and Brian at any point before this, or is this is the first time we're talking about those two?
I think she's brought him up before.
It might
Ned
be
and Brian, like the people that get the other provisions.
Well, Ned was another person who was out there, another ranger essentially, and Brian is his son.
Yeah, because as you're finding the notes, you can report them back to Delilah, and she'll vaguely answer your questions.
Okay. So at this point, I guess assuming that you've done a little bit of that, and because a lot of that stuff is optional, so you can, and even the conversations that you have with Delilah, I forgot to even mention that. Sometimes you don't even have to say anything. You're given a chance to answer, but sometimes you could literally just not say anything. I do remember there was a situation that came up, and she had said something kind of weird to me about my wife, and then I just didn't respond back.
This game does a really good job of offering that ... and actually like making it a viable choice in a lot of situations.
Yeah. But anywho, so now this is where you end up having this conversation about Ned and Brian. So you go out to this little camp area, and this is where Brian has kind of been like stashing out at sometimes, I guess. You see a lot of, and it goes back to the kind of the world building, like contextual stuff that they have. So I guess you end up finding that Brian is like a really bright kid. He's out there. He has, illustrations of this, science project that he wants to try out. He's got drawings everywhere. He has a notebook that has like all these sketches on it and stuff like that. It seems like he's, like a, really well-rounded kid. And another thing that's kind of weird, there's these posts that they use for climbing, I guess, or I forget what you call them.
The pythons?
Yeah, I mean, this might be the right term for it. And you found him out there along with a note that says, hey, he was going to send these back. He was going to send these back home, because I guess he doesn't like climbing, and his dad's been pushing him to climb a bunch. And the goal was he didn't want to just throw them away because that's his dad's stuff, and he was like, that's not right to do it. So I'm going to try and just send these back home so he'll still have them, but now he won't be able to make me climb, because these are gone. But he never got around to doing that, apparently. So I thought that was kind of cool. And I didn't find out that part until I actually went back because I was streaming this, and I think part of it I was just kind of BSing with chat, so there was a lot of things that I missed. So I had to kind of go back and look at it. But I was like, oh, so then now this kind of makes sense, and kind of, the following events, it kind of makes you think about the following events that happen in a different way when you think about it like that.
And there's just a lot of subtle stuff like that, and I didn't catch that through my playthrough. And that's a really interesting detail, because when you brought it up, I'm like, wait, what? That's what all those drawings were about, and all the little whiteboards you find out there, and all the...
Yeah. And wow. even when he found... There's a part earlier in the game where you find a book bag when you're just kind of out in the wild, and I think it has I want to say it has Brian Goodwin's name on it, and then she kind of... Like, Delilah doesn't really... She's like, huh, what was the name again? And he's like, Brian Goodwin. He's like... It's like, oh, okay. Yeah, that name sounds familiar, but I hadn't heard it in a while. And she just kind of like doesn't really give you a whole lot of information on it. But yeah, so you find all that, and then you get these these posts that you can use to kind of and basically in a game sense it's used to help you progress further in areas that you weren't able to access before. So anyways, this lets you go a little bit further back in the cave. So once you get back into that cave, you kind of navigate down to where you saw the shoe, and then you end up finding that there's a dead body. And we don't really know who this is at that point. But I think Delilah's starting to think that this might be Brian. I mean, I don't really think we know for sure. Or maybe there is like a little bit of a cue that makes you think that. I forget what it was.
Well, don't you kind of still think that it might be that attacker person? Like, you don't have the full context for Brian's death. You just know he's at the bottom of this cave.
Yeah.
So you're like, oh my god, I'm out here with a killer.
Yep. That might be what it is, I think.
And I think this game just does a really, I've said this like 7 times, but of making this what we will find out to be, I don't want to say mundane death, but like it makes you think that something is bigger than it's supposed to be, and all of these past events are linked to it, and you're trying to like piece together everything from day one and trying to pretty much do this like Illuminati chart of, okay, so these 2 girls went missing and now this boy is missing, so now where am I gonna find their bodies next? And
yeah,
is this guy gonna come after me? Do I need to be careful? This game has a lot of horror elements to it that I really appreciate.
Yeah.
And just the fact that they, keep going back at it without ever like crossing a certain line as far as like, oh well, this is a very bloody death, but it's still a death, so I need to be on my P's and Q's no matter where I go, especially in this cave area. I think that's a really good job that they did on that aspect of the game.
And I don't know if you were here when I was talking to Trevor about it, but I was saying like when I first started this game, I had no context about what it was going to be at all, and all I had seen about it was the E3. I think it was either at E3 or one of the PSX or something, but it had like a big stage reveal, and just looking at it then, I assumed it was going to be a horror game, right? I didn't know anything else about it, but it just looked like it from that trailer. And that's what I was expecting coming into it. Like, oh, this is going to be like some type of weird horror, supernatural game. And just even in passing, I've had like friends say, man, that was like a really good game. He's like, you should check it out. And still having no context of it, I'm just thinking that's exactly what it was. And it couldn't be further from like what it really is,
Well, they just plant all of these seeds in you. There's like your place getting vandalized, the potential threat of this bear that always gets mentioned. And I'm like, when am I going to have the run-in with the bear? Because I know I don't have anything to fight it. This is going to be a very bad day. Then there's a whole radio thing and being knocked out. They make all of these little subtle hints that something bad is going to happen, but never quite fully followed through on it. And in some ways, that makes it more scary.
Well, yeah. So, man, I really wish I probably need to look this up just to make sure, but I do think there's something that triggers them to finally figure out that, oh, that was Brian. And at that point, Delilah starts blaming his death on her because, she's saying, oh, I could have told somebody that he was out here this entire time. He wasn't even supposed to be here, and it's all my fault. And you're basically trying to console her to be like, hey, this isn't on you. You didn't do this. There's nothing that you could have done about this. But yeah, it's kind of a very weird situation because I'm trying to think, because
there's no way you can get out of this without losing your job.
Yeah.
And you done messed up.
And it's like she'd already made so many missteps before that anyway, as far as like, we're still assuming that the 2 girls are still missing and they're possibly dead, and she still hasn't made,
Probably dead, because it's been a long time.
Yeah. And, and you're just like, I don't want to say she's incompetent, because that's not what it is, I guess, but I don't know.
It's like when good people get a little bit too deep into the water and they just don't know how to paddle anymore.
Yeah. Like she just really wasn't sure what to do, and I could tell with the whole Ned and Brian situation. I mean, obviously she has good intentions because I believe she was saying that, or what she was alluding to was Ned bringing Brian out there was because he had some trouble back home or something like that, and then she made mention of, it's probably better than whatever whatever he had going on back home. For the reason why, his dad brought him out there instead of leaving him back home. But then again, I don't really know because we don't know. I mean, obviously she's talked to Ned, but we don't know, what she knows about Ned's, past or what type of person he really is or anything like that. Or, it's kind of hard to tell without really knowing what they spoke about. So anyway, it moves into day 79 where a fire has started at that campsite, and it's grown out of control and everyone is ordered to evacuate. A weird thing about this day that I noticed earlier, at least if I remember right, he wakes up and his wedding ring's off, and I thought that was kind of weird because he has it on the entire game, and even when he's woken up every other day his wedding ring's been on. But on this day, when he's waking up and he's got to clean out his tower, his wedding ring's off. And I'm like, huh.
Wait, so at any point in the game did y'all put the wedding ring on?
It had always been on, to my knowledge. I'd never, maybe...
I don't remember explicitly putting it on. I just thought
in my game, it was always on the desk.
Wow. I think it would. If I did put it on, it had to have been at the very beginning, and it just stayed on. But then, like I said, on that last day, it wasn't on, and I was like, "That's kind of weird."
Yeah, because every day when we were in, if it was like on a day where you get to leave the station and explore, first thing I would do is grab my hat, put it on, and then I would look over at the desk and see the wedding ring there, but I wouldn't put it on. And then, but yeah, I don't ever remember like picking it up and putting it on.
I'd have to, man, I'm gonna have to like skip
really
through my
interesting
archive
detail.
real quick. Cause I remember it just always being on, and then that's why I thought it was so weird on the last day that it wasn't. But hold on, I'm gonna kind of skip through this for a second just to see, cause I swear that's how it was for me. Let me see. But anyway, while it's going on, trying to remember what else happens on day 79, because this is basically a day where everybody's packing up their stuff and it's like, hey, it's time to dip.
Wait, what was that?
Oh no, I was saying on day 79, this is like the final day of you guys working out there because everybody has to evacuate because of how bad the fire's gotten.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is literally the climax of the game. Like, hey, I'm leaving. We need to figure this out, and we also need to get out of here.
Yeah. So you end up taking your tracking device and following a trail with that, and it leads you to a not necessarily a campsite, but leads you to another tape. And the tape is Ned basically explaining everything. So, and this is kind of where it kind of like demystifies a lot of the things that you might have been thinking or like whatever notions you had. So, come to find out,
conspiracy theory just all getting unfolded right in front of you.
Oh, yeah. Hold on, I just heard my son. Give me like 1 second. I'll be right back. I don't know if you guys want to kind of continue this conversation.
I can spearhead for a little bit.
Okay.
So, one of the things that I thought was really interesting about this game was the graphics. Did you like the graphic style?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like it has a very, I don't want to say low poly because low poly kind of implies that it's just very simplistic, but it has a.
It is simplistic, but at the same time, it's super detailed in some regards.
And like even
like it almost has a claymation Pixar-esque type of feel, at least for like when you look down at your hands, they're like, I don't know, squares practically, but they're really good-looking squares.
I mean, like the part that I like most is like if you ever look out at the like the environment from a distance, it looks really good. The way things are silhouetted, the color palettes that are used on different days or different times of the day, and especially like in this final, like the climax when you're getting ready to leave, and
just the orange tinge that kind of overlays everything. And I think the game does a really good job with shadows. That was something like, I know I played on PC, so I don't know if it's the same on consoles or whatever, but all of the trees have like really nice shadows, and they all play into the environment and makes you feel like you're in this actual space, despite it having a kind of, it's almost Overwatch-esque or like Blizzard-esque in its cartooniness, but in a way that I really appreciate.
I mean, like you said, like the Pixar thing, it reminded me of what's the character's name in Up? I forgot his name. Old man.
Old dude?
Yeah. That's what it kind of reminded me of.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly that style though, with like the very non-roundish type of style that it has going for it. But I thought that was really good. I like the audio design was very subtle. But then when the music like started to kick in at like significant points, like it really made a difference in the scene.
Yeah, and I meant to actually look at the soundtrack to find some of those songs because there's one particular song that starts playing.
There's some really good tracks on the soundtrack.
Huh?
There's some really good tracks on the soundtrack. Yeah. Like I was trying to find some for the intro and outro for the podcast and everything, and it's like, oh man, this is something I need to pick up eventually.
Okay. All right, I'm back. Did you guys already talk about Ned? Like, I guess
we just did a quick aside about graphics and audio.
Oh, okay.
What do you think about the graphics and audio?
I think the art style is really cool. Like, I definitely appreciate the because it's not like it kind of comes off as like a Team Fortress type art style, I guess, a little bit, right? Like, but like a more bright version of that.
Exactly. That's. Like we were saying Overwatch and Blizzard, but I think Team Fortress might be the closest comparison.
But yeah, definitely has like really well done art. And the music's good as well. It's like there's not a lot of it, but it comes at really good times.
What was the song playing on the boombox? Do you remember?
I can't remember. I'd have to go look it up.
It was something like very that era's like. Can't remember if it was like Girls Just Want to Have Fun or something dumb.
But yeah, definitely has really well done art, and the music's really good as well. Okay, so I guess you guys want to move into the revelation, I guess, at this point.
Yeah, please explain it to me because I'm still trying to piece it together.
So I think Ned just comes clean about everything. So he says Brian's death was an accident. He was just teaching him how to, he was just trying to show him how to climb. And it was just, he fell off. He just made a mistake and fell off. Which, again, it's hard for me to really think. I guess, I don't know. I don't want to say that Ned did, like, kill him. Because you don't really know enough about Ned at this point. It's kind of hard to say whether it was an accident or not.
From what I inferred, it seemed like it was a genuine mistake. Like, I forgot what exactly happened, but it was just negligence, and he happened to die. It wasn't like he wanted that dude to die or whatever.
I think even Delilah thinks, I think even she mentions maybe, and this may be just to kind of mess with the player, play off like your emotions or whatever. She's like, I guess that's the first thing that she thinks is that he killed him, which kind of makes it seem like, does she know if Ned's kind of like a shitty person and just,
like contextually, they made it seem like it was a genuine accident, but then at the same time, like he was the one responsible and all the clues point to him as as the culprit. And then at the same time, Delilah, because like from what I gathered, Ned was the watchman before Henry got there, right?
I believe
And
so. Yeah.
Brian, his son, was living there, or was there with him. And Delilah,
which is I think against the
right,
rules.
Delilah was supposed to report it, and she didn't.
Yeah.
Like she knew he was out there, but didn't say anything. And then once, that was another bad judgment call on her part, because once he died, she was more concerned about losing her job than I guess doing her job.
Yeah.
And ended up not reporting it or not saying that he was out there, which is another reason why she probably didn't want them investigating the two missing girls, because then they would have ended up finding the body. Or I guess she didn't know the body was down there, but figured they would have found the body somewhere.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and but then that makes me question: did she? I mean, well, I don't know. I guess the reaction she has, obviously, it's got to be that she didn't know about it. But I mean, she definitely has her reasons for not wanting police to get out there in the first place and like kind of snoop around. Clearly,
If you think about it, her and Ned are kind of in a similar situation with the whole, like, she's put into the same situation that Ned is, where he's pretty much out there because he can't go back to society and explain, like, hey, my son died. And now she's kind of in the same situation where it's like, all this terrible stuff is happening, and I have no actual control over any of it.
yeah.
So let me try to hide as much as possible.
And now that I'm thinking about it, I guess it's kind of, I don't know if this is like me looking too deep into it, but it kind of plays off the whole metaphor of like it being fires, right? Things just kind of spread out and you just don't have any control sometimes. So like stop how things go. It's kind of funny how it plays into like the theme of the game.
Yeah, that does seem like a really good metaphor. Just like, hey, here's these small fires that we're, able to put out. That's our job. But then what happens when the fire is too big for, the fireman?
Yeah. So, and I think he admits that, or I can't remember if he admits it or if you just find out some other way. But basically, the two girls were found. So that's one thing you find. I think Delilah tells you that they ended up finding the two girls. They're safe, and Ned was just chilling on that in Wapiti Station. He basically just took the equipment there, and he was just listening out to make sure that nobody was radioing that, calling in the dead body, basically, and just trying to make sure nobody was, snitching on him, basically. I can't remember if he specifies what he's going to do now after he left that. Does anybody remember?
To be honest, there's not much he can do. I feel like, does he kind of accept that the fire's going to get him at this point?
Maybe. I don't know if he tries to dip out or if he's said he's going to leave, or he's just kind of like, well, I'm just going to chill here and just deal with it, and what happens is what happens.
But yeah, I think they just kind of let that thread go for what it's worth.
And so the final thing that you do at this point, essentially you've kind of, for the most part, you've wrapped up every, most of the loose ends, right? Other than like we're not really too sure what Ned's gonna do, but obviously he's not going back with you. So it's kind of like basically everything's wrapped up, and now you're taking your last walk to the helicopter, which I believe Delilah had already left, but she's still communicating to you as you're kind of walking to the helicopter.
That was another weird conversation.
Oh, like, what
between Henry and Delilah? Like when she tells him that the helicopter has arrived, and you have the option to, ask her to wait for you, and not to leave yet. But I imagine with either response, she tells you she can't wait and she's gonna leave. I don't know. It just felt like it was the developer's way of not letting you meet her when it obviously could have happened there.
Yeah, it for sure had to be intentional because, like I said, I feel like that's what the game leads up to, and you think it's going to happen. But they felt like that might have been too much because it breaks your whatever like thing in your mind of how you have that, or, that you have that she might look like this or she's like this type of person. Maybe they thought it was just like, we don't really want to go through that.
Well, I think it was also trying to take away like the notion of choice in that thing where like in a lot of games it's like, "Oh, well, I want to be with the girl." And then she kind of goes off and she's like, "Well, I'm not really feeling this dude anymore."
Yeah,
So she just kind of does her own thing. Cuz she kind of at that point in the game, she pretty much acts very distant from you.
And there's another. I don't know if it was like a part of the like the context that you can skip over or not. But there's
hmm
one instance where it actually says that Delilah was still with her boyfriend.
I can't remember. I don't. I'm trying
So
to remember if I ever heard her mention her boyfriend at that point. Maybe she did. I just don't remember.
I think there is something that gets mentioned earlier about a boyfriend, and she's like, well, doesn't she say that she found out he was cheating on? Like, there's something very specific with her previous relationship where I
That
think
might
she's
be
like,
what it is, right? I think you might be right.
because I remember she being like, the previous dude I was with was a jerk or whatever, and then you find out it's like, oh well, technically, I can't remember if she lied about it or if she's just like, oh, we're still together, regardless. But it kind of seems like she was going through a thing where she wanted to have like maybe a little bit of a fling, or she was just lonely out there. But now that she's gotten evacuated and actually has options again, that she's more open to actual relationships. To the dismay of the character or the person behind the keyboard or controller.
Yeah. Um, and I think one of the last choices that you have as far as talking to Delilah is, I think she talks to you about, well, what are you gonna do? And I think you get some choices on whether you want to go back home to Julia, and check on her, or there's basically a conversation that kind of comes off as like, hey, well, do it? It gives the player what appears to be a choice of like, well, do I want to actually try and pursue a relationship with Delilah and be like, hey, let's meet up when we get out of here, you know? And I think that I just wanted to try and see if what happened. So I think I chose that option, and she's like, well, actually, no, that's not gonna work. And like, no, the thing you need to do is go back home and check on Julia. Do like basically she's telling you do the right thing. You know, so that goes back to what you were saying, Dante, about she's kind of being a little bit more distant now, right? She doesn't really want to, seems like she doesn't want to have any type of thing to do with you at this point.
Right.
Um, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I think after that, I think that's the last choice that you get, and then you get on the helicopter, and then that kind of ends the game. Unless I'm missing anything.
I think that's just
They
about
did
it.
actually mention the, I guess, what happened to those two girls. They ended up finding them.
Yeah,
Yeah. So that goes back into this whole game kind of. It spirals a lot of ideas in your mind as a player, but then it actually, like, it's like, oh, all of these strange events happened, but no, they're all, isolated events, and it's not part of this greater, you know, scheme or conspiracy theory or whatever you want to call it. It just kind of happens naturally, and we allow our brains to link stuff that doesn't necessarily need to be linked.
yeah. Basically playing off of expectations, I guess, right?
Exactly, and just having, the girls go missing, the attack, all of that stuff, and you can draw a byline between all of those that you can make a line that makes sense, but that doesn't mean it's a correct line.
So, so I guess with that ending everything, how does everybody feel about the climax and the conclusion to everything?
I'll let Trevor go first.
I thought it tied everything together really well. Um, I think as far as the mechanics of the game, like being able to interact with things, like especially with the notes, I don't think it went far enough.
I guess how so?
Like I was expecting, I don't know, maybe I was expecting more than just the notes to be contextual, because at no point could you actually use the notes to further the story at all. I don't know. Not
Yeah.
to say I was expecting
Like
to
piece together a puzzle
yeah.
type thing, or
Not to say I was expecting to be able to present them like evidence in Ace Attorney or anything, but just to, I don't know, be able to use them to figure other things out.
I get it. Like more of like there was like more of a use for this. Like there's, and it's not.
Like had
I think it goes back to what Dante was saying of just kind of like it's a gamification of things. It's just kind of like you expect that you have the expectation of I'm picking these things up. There's got to be a reason why I'm doing this, or there's got to be something that this is going to pay off, or not necessarily pay off, right? But there's going to come a time where I'm going to need to use these for something.
like I really wish there were not necessarily other characters that you could interact with, but other characters that you could learn about through these contextual notes and other things that you come across. Because the game, because it's a linear game, it sort of fills you in on what you need to know about Ned and Brian.
Yeah.
And so like all the other stuff is optional. But if there were actually like notes that were about like side characters, maybe there was another Firewatch person who came in like between Ned and Henry. Maybe there were notes about him or something like that that kind of added on to what Ned was doing out there. I don't know, just something that went a little bit further, because it seemed, like I said, because the game is linear and it tells you everything you need to know, it seems like the notes weren't necessary at all and didn't add that much.
I think you're going to say something, Dante?
I was gonna say, like, I do think the notes were a very good touch. Like I can see what you're getting at. Whereas like I feel like most games, like especially adventure games, it's almost like, how do I describe this? It's almost like somebody like doused your, I don't know, like pasta in sauce, and there's just a ton of sauce on your pasta. This game takes a very subtle approach, and it's like, maybe let me just put a little bit on top and just kind of let the noodles do the talking.
Yeah.
It's a weird analogy, but most games try to go so deep into their own lore, or so much into like, oh well, here's what happened to everybody in the background, and this is what this person is doing, and this is what this person is doing. Whereas this game is just, hey, let me give you a couple contextual things about this person. You might not know everything about them, but you might find something that you latch onto, and it might paint how you perceive this person.
Which
so
I think
it does it differently than most games in that regard.
Which I think is like a more powerful, like meaningful way of doing it, because it's there if you want to take it and run with it, but if you don't, it also isn't necessarily detracting from whatever. I mean, or normally shouldn't, or I would assume it's not, but it's not detracting from whatever enjoyment you're getting out the game anyway.
And I think it does a good job of leaving the characters pretty open-ended, where like we kind of know who Delilah is, we kind of know who Ned is, we kind of know who Henry is, but none of us have the exact same picture of it. Whereas like Max and Chloe, we have a very good, like, hey, this is their literal life story, and this is how this person acts in every situation.
Yeah.
Where like if they did that with this game, then that whole twist with Delilah at the end wouldn't have worked, because we've been like, oh well, Delilah typically functions as X, but then when they threw that curveball at the end, it was genuinely surprising, just because we didn't have that context from before.
Right. I definitely can agree with you there. I don't know. I think I feel like the game. I did appreciate. I felt like they closed everything up. I mean, there's obviously a couple other things that might have been able to be fleshed out, but other than that, I was pretty satisfied with how it ended. Um, I felt like I don't know. I still, I guess I do have some issues as far as how Delilah handled everything. All the events before, the kind of the climax, but um, I wasn't upset. All right, at the end of it, I guess of being like, man, this is kind of crazy. Why would you do that? But for sure, yeah, I think I did appreciate how they kind of wrapped everything up for the most part.
Yeah, and I guess like I had played Gone Home, I had played What Remains of Edith Finch. I think I've played a couple other walking simulators, and those didn't really like. What Remains of Edith Finch is pretty good, and I enjoyed my time with Gone Home, but this was the first one that actually like connected with me, if that makes any sense. Like there was just something to all of the characters and how they were written. I thought all of the dialogue in this game was really good, and how it felt more natural than most video games. Most video games hit you over the top with like exposition and like, oh, this is who I am as a person, whereas this just kind of focused on this is who I am as like, I don't know. It was just very subtle how him and Delilah talked to one another, and you
Yeah,
just kind of had to infer everything in between. Then
it came off like really natural.
The thing that this game adds to, like I've played most of those walking sims, like Greg and I were talking about that before you came on, Dante, and
mm-hmm.
and like in all of those walking sims, well, Firewatch adds the aspect of time in the game. Like time is actually passing, and I think that's something that helps it stand out among others because certain things develop over time in this game.
Yeah, and it's kind of up to the player to piece together what exactly happened during that time. Like, there's a pretty significant gap between like when the first fire happens and the next day, isn't there? I'd like to say.
You're talking about like the when you see like the trail of smoke.
Like the one that we call June, the big fire or whatever.
I think that happened within
I think
like
it's like a week or something.
I want to say that happens within like the last 3 days of the game. Or actually no, because
Like-
you name it during one of those vignettes.
Yeah, it's like I think that's day 64 where you name it, so it's like earlier before. That's right before everything pops off, basically.
Yeah, and then I think they skip a couple days. Like it says in the walkthrough I'm looking at, 64 goes to 77.
Yeah,
So just the fact that this kind of monumental event happened, and then you kind of have to piece together, oh, this is what they've been doing for the past like 2 weeks pretty much, and how they've handled it. I thought that was fascinating. Because most games would skip to like the following day and just like, oh, well, we're in full crisis mode. And instead of doing that full crisis thing, they're just like, oh, well, it's been 2 weeks and this is how our lives are now. And this is how our relationship has changed since then.
yeah. All right, so I guess that kind of wraps everything up. Does anybody have any other thoughts that they had about the game or anything that you would? I guess we kind of went over that a little bit already, right, with the conclusion.
Yeah, I'm pretty content with.
Yeah, I'm glad I finally finished this game.
Yeah. I think this is kind of another one of those games. If it hadn't have been for the podcast, I would have never gotten to it. Just because I didn't, again, like just basing it off of all like my first impression of like the trailer, like nothing really struck out at me about it. Like, and I did want to play it, but I just didn't have any sense of urgency of when to get around to it. So, who knows?
Like when I booted it up, I begrudgingly booted it up because everything I had seen about the game seemed like the type of game I wouldn't really enjoy for real.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I got in there and like I was weary about it at first, just all the walking that you're doing, and it's like, oh, I need this map. And so actually I'm going to divert for a quick second. Does anybody listen to Idle Thumbs, the podcast?
No, no.
Okay, so like a couple of the guys on that podcast made this game, correct?
Yeah, I did reference that when I was going over the background.
So I had listened to their podcast for about a year, and it's kind of become like, I guess you could call it a meme of the podcast, where they are in love with Far Cry 2, And have either of you played that game?
Oh yeah, no, I've played it. Yeah, that was I wanted to say it was like probably like my game of the year when it came out. Like,
You remember the whole map thing, right?
yeah.
In Far Cry. Yeah, and you can just tell, like, these dudes love that game so much. Just with how you have the map out at all times and you're just trying to navigate. And I thought that was fascinating after hearing them talk about Far Cry 2 so much. And I'm like, oh, yeah, you can definitely tell they like that game a lot.
Yeah, now that I think about it, you can kind of see some of the influence there as far as the navigation stuff and even how the map's built out.
And kind of some of the, I don't want to say mission layout per se, because there's not really missions per se in this game, but Far Cry 2, from what I remember, is pretty open-ended, and you just kind of do what you want when you want.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just thought that was really cool, and I'm really glad that they took the time to make this game, and they made it very different from your traditional walking simulator and games in general, I feel like. A lot of things that they did would be considered bad game design by most people, but they put it into a product where it all works, or at least most of it works, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. I did get some recommendations to check out Tacoma after this. I don't know, have either of you played that? Because I don't know if that kind of is anything like this or not.
I own it, but I haven't gotten into it.
It's interesting. Like, I said this game deals with time more than other walking sims, but that one has a huge time mechanic in it. It works differently, but it puts you in the middle of things that are going on at certain times. Like, you'd have to play it to kind of understand, but it's worth checking out. Like, I actually like it a lot better than Gone Home. It's
Yeah, I forgot I did play Gone Home. I was trying to think of other walking simulators, but yeah, I guess it's one of them. But yeah, I'd played that too.
I would recommend What Remains of Edith Finch. Like, that game was pretty fun. It's like it's like playing a pop-up book.
Yeah, it relies more on the fantastical side of things, and it's very different than Gone Home in this one, where those are kind of based roughly in reality, but it does a lot of really interesting things with storytelling.
And if you get really bored, Dear Esther.
Isn't that the one with like the 0.1 mile per hour walk or whatever? Ugh.
Yeah. I might add that to the list, or maybe next time voting comes up, I might try and sneak that in there, see if that actually makes it. So, yeah, I think if that's it, if nobody has any like quarrels they have with the game or whatever, I'll say we can wrap it on up and head to the outro of the show.
I got my traditional question.
Oh yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. So after playing this game, would you ever go camping by yourself?
I mean, first of all, I would never go. I don't think I would even go camping, but definitely I would not go camping by myself.
How much lower is your desire of camping by yourself after playing this game?
Way lower. Like, it
just seems like a bad idea.
Like, nothing. I don't know. I could never think of any. I guess I do know some of my friends do that. Like, they'll kind of go out and do hiking and then they'll camp, but obviously I guess they're doing it with other people as well, so it's a little bit of a different experience. But just, I could never think about doing that by myself. Like,
yeah.
I think at one point in my life I could have, but after playing this game, it's a hard no. It's a really hard no.
Yeah, if I were to go camping, it would have to be with a bunch of people. And I would, after playing this game, I don't know, man. I was still looking out for that bear.
That bear is a secret antagonist, dude. Like, every time I got close to that cave, I was freaking... Oh, my God.
You just waiting on it to happen?
Exactly. Like, you know how Marcus is, like, he's anticipating the evil within and, like, some of the intro stuff that you've actually played?
Yeah.
I feel like I had that same thing with this stupid bear. I'm like, when is it going to jump out? It's going to show up. They have a bear problem here.
It's got to happen. So, all right. Well, I don't think we have any emails, but let me verify that just to make sure. Nope. Okay. All right. So no emails, but we do have another way for you guys to get in touch with us if you want. So we still have email, just in case you want to do that. You know, you've got misscheckpoints@gmail.com. But now we also have a Twitter account. So let me not botch this, so I'm looking this up to make sure. So you guys can also follow us on Twitter at MC or M Checkpoints. I don't know why I said MC.
Character limits. Character limits. That's all I'm gonna say.
So it's Miss Checkpoints on Twitter. So what we'll probably end up starting to do is when the show goes out, we'll probably tweet out there.
Hopefully we can get some more activity on that Twitter, because Twitter seems like a platform where you just kind of, have a little bit of fun with it.
Yeah. So we'll be there as well. Also on Facebook. If you guys aren't following us there, which you should be. So it'd be facebook.com/misscheckpoints. So you also can keep abreast of what's going on there. You guys can see the schedule that's on the banner, so you see what games we're playing. The next game that we will be playing through, when is that show scheduled to go live?
So this episode is going to go live today or tonight, theoretically. So
in 2 weeks, it should be the first part of
the 14th.
So on the 14th would be the first episode of Evil Within. So that's the October game. So that coincide with Halloween. So that'll be interesting. I think all of us haven't. Well, I guess I've played a chunk of it, but has anybody else played it previously?
I have not played it up until like a week ago.
Okay. And then what about you, Trevor? Had you played it before we started for the show?
I haven't even touched it yet.
Okay. So yeah, like I said, I had got to, I want to say it was like at least 2/3 or 75% of the way through the game and hit like a part I was stuck at. And rather than try to checkpoint or go back a few chapters to try and get enough resources to get through it, I just kind of said screw it and just never went back. But yeah, so it'll be a little bit interesting to see how you guys feel about it, and also based off the fact that Marcus hates those type of games.
He's super scary.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how the next two shows will go. So it'll definitely be fun.
You might want to follow him on Twitter, Marcus.
Oh yeah. Also,
he's putting out some pretty good content
to kind of see how because he's pretty good about posting how he feels about the games on social media. So yeah, you can enjoy his experience based off of Ninja Gaiden. You can expect probably a similar experience to that. So, but yeah, so as far as social media plugs, you guys can follow me on Twitter at Boombox Hero. Facebook should be the same thing, Boombox Hero. And on Twitch, which still primarily just streaming Street Fighter, but I've been a lot more active on Twitch. So I stream a playthrough of Overwatch, so I'll probably stream a good bit of Evil Within, if not all of it. So you guys can follow me on Twitch at twitch.tv/xdrdmagnegro. And where can people find you at, Trevor?
You can find me on Twitch, Twitter at Lyric Unsung.
Bet. And what about you, Dante?
People can find me at twitch.tv/awakencloud. Recently I've been streaming, last week I did Kingdom Hearts 2, and now I'm back into Spider-Man, so I'm about halfway through that, and I should be streaming Evil Within and potentially Shadow of the Tomb Raider. I think those are my next two.
I forgot that came out.
Yep.
Man.
It's been a good good month for video games.
And I was just getting off topic, but Forza Horizon 4 comes out I think this week, right? I want to say.
Yeah, that game looks good.
And I didn't even think about it, but I was like, oh, I got Game Pass, so I can actually play that. It just kind of just came to my mind. I was like, all right, I can actually play it. I didn't really have any intentions of buying it, but then thinking I got this for free, I might as well check it out. So
I might need to pick up Game Pass. That seems like a really good deal.
I saw that they had a deal on Slick Deals. I want to say it was like $100 for a year, and you got Forza, or I forgot what was included with it. It was something else. But yeah, I mean, I think it was. I ended up getting it during what was it? I want to say it was Prime Day or something like that. That they had them on sale for 6 months for $30, and ended up picking up a year just to give it a shot. So yeah.
Man.
But yeah, lots of we're at the good time of the year anyway. There's gonna be a bunch of stuff to play. So
Yeah, and if you want to let us know what you're playing, hit us up on Twitter or Facebook at mcheckpoints or mischeckpoints, depending on which source you're at.
yeah. So all right, I think that wraps it up for this bonus episode. So anyways, hope you guys enjoyed it, and we will catch you on the next show. So later.